Mass Effect TV series in the works at Amazon from Fast and Furious 9 writer. This is from Variety by Joe Otterson. A Mass Effect TV series is officially in development at Amazon MGM Studios, Variety has learned exclusively. Daniel Casey is set to write and executive produce the adaptation. Kareem Zarek will executive produce under his Cedar Tree Productions banner, with Ari Arad and EA's Michael Gamble also executive producing. Cedar Tree is currently under an overall deal at Amazon MGM Studios. Exact plot details are being kept under wraps. It was previously reported in 2021 that Amazon was in negotiations to develop a Mass Effect TV series, but there have been no updates on the project until now. There had also been various attempts to develop a feature film based on the games, but that project never materialized. The first Mass Effect game launched to rave reviews in 2007. Since then, there have been 3 more games in the series, Mass Effect Andromeda debuting in 2017. There have also been multiple mobile games and in the franchise, as well as an animated film, novels, comics, and other media. So, Mass Effect, Amazon, TV show, not a movie, TV show, written and executive produced by the Furious 9. Is that what was that one was called?
Yes, Fast and Furious 9.
Fast and Furious 9. Well, that wasn't the name of the thing. What was the name of that one, though?
I think I literally just looked it up.
F9. F9. Yeah. Oh, man, even shorter. That's right. I remember the promo ads for it now. Yeah, the F9. Yeah.
I had to look it up when I read that because I was like, is that the one with the new one or is it the one before the new one? It's the one before the new one.
So this immediately, you got a bunch of questions. What is it? What story are we following inside the world of Mass Effect? Are we doing the trilogy? Is this going to be a direct adaptation? How are you handling that? Player choice is such a big deal. The canon Mass Effect story is not set, so that's going to be a very, very interesting thing to play out. Or are we doing more of an original story? Maybe we're expanding on a piece of lore that we already know about. Maybe we are telling a story completely separate from that of Commander Shepard. Who knows? Fast and Furious 9 writer set to write and executive produce. Now, F9, not the greatest movie in the world. Fun, but not the greatest movie in the world at all. I think when you go into a Fast and Furious, you know what you're doing, right? You're there to do the dumb action movie. We're gonna create dumb things to make the scenarios happen and so forth. So I'm not saying that just because this writer worked on that, we can expect that level of quality. Ideally, they would know what they're working with here, and we are coming hot off of Fallout through Amazon, right? Or was that one Paramount?
I want to say it's someone different. Let me say that.
I thought that was on Amazon Prime, was Fallout. But yeah, triple check on that one. So yeah, I'm curious. I hope it materializes and we actually see it come to life. We were still patiently waiting on that God of War adaptation to happen through Amazon. The Horizon Netflix one not going so well, obviously. And so yeah, we're in a strange time for all of these things. I don't know what the right choice is here. As a diehard fan of Mass Effect, seeing the original trilogy put to screen in a live-action way would be cool, but then you immediately have to start asking questions of like, okay, how do we do the aliens? Like, are we doing prosthetics, CGI, something in the middle? Like, how does that all work? Very complicated stuff. And immediately you're going into high-budget areas. Not impossible. There are examples of sci-fi TV shows with high budgets that work. There's examples of sci-fi TV shows with low budgets that work. And, just to run a gambit of everything else in between. So what is your take on this, Connor?
Well, to start off with the placement of what they would do in the Mass Effect universe, it is up in the air because it really depends on what their intentions are, because it would make sense if they'd want to do it as people know Mass Effect with Commander Shepard's story, having that translated over to a TV show could get a lot more eyes on it and attention on it than than a show set in the universe. So I feel like they'd have a better path to making more money, making it a direct adaptation of Mass Effect. But at the same time, because it's such a wide universe, they could do anything. And from an artistic perspective, I would really hope they, play around with the universe of Mass Effect. It's something that really hasn't been done with the IP at all. Obviously, there's some books and comic books, but in the main forms of media that most people consume, whether it's, a TV show or an anime or a video game or a movie, it might be interesting. It would be interesting to actually see you go beyond what the writers already paved with the original Mass Effect trilogy.
At the same time, the Reaper conflict is so central to that story, or as far as we know, it's central to that story. And I think a lot of fans would like to see that conflict put to screen. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, with just the heavy focus on politics in Mass Effect, you know, the sex, the scandal, the strong characters. I mean, this could be an easy sci-fi version of Game of Thrones. You know, the winter is coming, the Reapers are coming. Mm-hmm. Like that, it's the same type of idea and pitch. And of course, as we saw with Game of Thrones, the writers and directors of that show, for a long time when they were following the books, were doing great work. They were great adapters. We could see a great adaptation here, just kind of fitting it to the TV format in some way. I don't know.
And that's the thing about the conflict you were talking about with the Reapers. It being the Fast and Furious 9 writer kind of brings up some positives, but also some negatives. Positives, if they do go that route, the more fun, action-packed direction, there's a lot more faith I have in that writer to write good set pieces, to write good moments.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with who else is in the writing room, which is very important for my next take, which is that it's the Fast and Furious 9 writer. So if they don't go that direction and they go the more politic, relations between different races, organizations within Mass Effect, which, arguably is one of the more interesting aspects of it. The Reaper plot's obviously the main driving factor of the narrative, but people love hearing about all of the different races, finding out about them, interacting with them, carving their path with Commander Shepard, which would make it a little bit difficult if you're going to go down his same exact route or her same exact route, where if it's a new character, you can take them in a completely different direction than just Paragon or Renegade, which is generally what you would think they'd go with if they were to do a direct adaptation of the Mass Effect story, to try and bring in those fans. And because it's already kind of writes itself, you have the good, moral protagonist or the, kind of ruthless, get things done protagonist. You play around with more of that if you can play around more with that if you go with a different character than Shepard. But again, if they go a route where there's not a lot of action going on, it's not exactly certain that this writer can do a good job with it. Because writing is not the main strength of the Fast and Furious movies.
Right, but being a writer, like you take what the IP that you're working with, you provide what it needs for that. So just because they wrote for a Fast and Furious movie doesn't mean they're a bad writer. It could mean they're actually a great writer because they make something convoluted and stupid and working with a team of how would you describe a Vin Diesel?
Bland.
No, because Vin Diesel's like yoked out of his like he's like kind of a psycho, right? Yeah. So you work with that and you get it to work, and the infamously like the stars contracts come with like a bunch of things of like they can't lose fights or they can't look bad or things like that. So writing around those obstacles are difficult. If those are removed and we can actually have the freedom to tell a flushed out story. I mean, you're talking Paragon and Renegade. I think you're too gamey already. Too much video game already. Like Commander Shepard is someone who gets the job done. That's all you need to know, and then so from there, it's just we go down the points of all right, well, there are main beats that need to be hit. How do we get there? How do we translate that to live action? And then how do we make that interesting from a dialogue or action perspective? Type stuff like that. A lot of this, I think, is fairly easy to answer because the games are so well written naturally that you could probably lift a lot of those ideas. You'd have to streamline a lot of that dialogue because it being a video game, you have time for huge exposition dumps whenever you want. Whereas in TV, it's like, wow, you guys have been talking for 15 minutes. Can I see an alien get shot in the face, please? Or, some cool biotic power or things like that? I don't know.
But that depends on the quality of the writing because, it does have the framework of how to make a good TV show because it's already got great character beats, arcs of characters, interactions with them. But how are those going to play out in a TV setting? Because you obviously can't take the dialogue and just put it in there.
No, not
do a
one
little
for
bit
one.
of tweaks.
No, no.
So that's, again, where it comes back into, can this writer properly do that in a way that engages audiences? I hope so, I don't want them to just say, oh, well, you worked on Fast 9, so...
Creative projects are so weird in the sense of that, sometimes you're putting out really great stuff and sometimes you're not. And it's not necessarily based upon you. And it's very rarely based upon the quality of writing in a script, because a script is not what what you read on the page is not what you will see or hear in production or in execution and things like that. There's so many other steps along the way, so many other forms of interpretation and things, to where like you'll get to the end of that and you're like, yeah, the script might have been great, but then the movie was still garbage, or the script might have been garbage and then the movie was great, or there's so many different ways to write things. We bring up set pieces because we assume the writers of Fast and Furious are very heavily detailed in their set pieces. So it could be Shepard takes cover, leans over, provides covering fire for Garrus, who then flanks around to the left, like is hyper detailed in that way. Or there's a shootout, Shepard wins, and then it's just up to choreographers, direction, actors, stunt people in how that is executed. You know what I'm saying? So it just all depends.
Yeah.
For example, I've done some acting. There's things called stage directions, Connor. That's the stuff that's written into the script that like character moves to the left side of the screen and picks up a thing. Me as an actor, I throw those things away. I don't give a fuck about stage directions. Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean a thing to me. When I'm on stage, if the story needs to progress by me crossing over to the other side of the stage and picking up a phone, well, then I'm going to cross over and pick up a phone because that's what needs to happen next for the story to continue. But if there's a note, and usually stage directions are like leftover writings from a stage manager in the original production of the show or whatever, and then they just print that. So if it's just like character X crosses and then crosses back, I might do that if I feel it's necessary, or I could just throw that away. That's just an example of like writing, and what's on the page doesn't matter so much as to like what happens at the end result.
Mm.
Still matters, still important. Still got to get the words right, but there's a lot of other things. You look at it and it's like there's like 3 or 4 different executive producers. Daniel Casey, who's also writing it. Kareem Zreik is executive producing with Cedar Tree Productions. Ari Arad, who does most of his work with Sony. EA's Michael Gamble. Like that's what, 4 executive producers. Now that could mean that could be exactly what it needs. A name like Ari Arad attached to it probably means we will eventually see this come to fruition. But I don't want a Halo situation with the Halo TV show. I want Game of Thrones in space, personally.
Yeah, we've entered into a space where video game adaptations are no longer just a dead-in-the-water, venture in terms of the quality. It depends on, all the things you were just talking about, the different parts that come into play to make a movie or a television show. And from that, you have Halo, but you also have Fallout.
Yeah.
And then you also have, what was the other fucking thing? Outside of the realm of video game adaptations,
Last of Us,
Lord of the Rings adaptation. Varying qualities all across the board. At least they got something here. At least like the core of what Mass Effect is lends itself to a TV show or a movie.
Depending on success and how it's received, those 3 games are long. Yeah. You can stretch those out as long as you want, Game 1 doesn't have to be over in season 1. Mm-hmm. But game 1 or season 1 could end on Pharos or something, or like with the death of the whole season 1 could be about beating Matriarch Benezia or something like that. Like just in that alone, you've already got so much buildup that you can happen. Some will they, won't they? A Shepard. What is it when you like get like sexually involved with like coworkers and stuff?
Procreate?
No. It's going to drive me crazy. Anyways, a bunch of will they, won't they's with Shepard and the crew or whatever, if they choose to go that route. Should they just do the Shepard route?
See, this is a little fear I have.
Yeah.
Right? For this kind of show, you have Alien.
Yeah.
Either you're going to go the Star Trek route of, hey, we have aliens in the show. Let's have aliens in the show. Or you're going to go the route of like season 1 of Halo. I don't know everything else past that point, where it's just a lot of like human interactions when you're expecting a lot more aliens.
You got to do the aliens.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to.
More important than, not more important than
I
Halo.
I understand the idea of Halo of having a mostly human cast.
Even though it failed in that case.
In this case, it failed. But I understand in a production meeting of being like, well, we could have aliens, but like, what are the aliens in Halo? right? They're just the bad guys.
The religious fanatics. You can play around with that.
You can, but
And
but functionally in the games, it's just bad guys.
And their solution was, let's make the main antagonist a human character raised by the Covenant.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense at all,
Yeah.
Anyways, no, I mean, but like, what are the requirements for some of these aliens? One person wears a mask the whole time. Okay, that's not that hard. One, it requires some work, but it's not the hardest thing in the world. One is blue. All right,
yeah.
That's an annoying work week, is showing up 3 hours early to get blued up in the face all the time. And then one's got scaly face. Okay, that's a little harder. How do we do that? We put a mask on. Do we have a animatronic?
CGI.
Yeah. Do we do that plus a mix of CGI? That's a little trickier. Big turtle thing. Probably just a big suit, probably, or something. I don't know. These things get kind of tricky and complicated quickly.
I mean, a lot of what they could play around with that to skirt having to constantly have people in makeup is...
Keeper matters so much.
That'd be CGI. That's not...
Well, of course, yeah. Or,
okay.
I mean, you could get away probably with some models and so forth, like how they get destroyed. But, of course, we're working, like, way further down the line,
Yeah, I think their best avenue to have as many aliens in the show as possible is have them in armor. That means you're just having to worry about, props and the outfits rather than, like, do makeup, which, I'm assuming that's the harder part of making, practical effect aliens.
I mean, all of it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
There's no easy way to do, especially because like Turians are have much different proportions than humans do. You have to make that look right, and that is going to be a complicated time every single time you choose to have a Turian in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see a lot more humans than you are probably other things, just because that's so much easier and so much cheaper. Or a lot of blue people, because it's not that hard. You slap some blue on somebody, put a little hair prosthetic on top of their head, and there you go. You got a sorry.
Yeah.
It's when you start getting to the Solarians, the Turians, the Chunka Krogan. That's where it starts getting difficult. Even the Quarians aren't that hard.
Yeah, but Quarians seem to be...
Even the Geth are going to be pretty easy.
When we talk about these things, the more I think it's just going to do CG. It seems like that's like
you got to do a mix. You can't just like blanket statement CG things. Like that's not how production works. Sometimes it is, but not all the time. A space battle is going to be mostly CG. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's expensive to just have a CG model walking around with Shepard the whole time because you got to make it look like it's part of the world.
Yeah.
It's much easier to put a guy in a suit, have him be in makeup for 3 hours, and then do that. It's much more physically demanding, and you got to pay attention to those details, and things break or go wrong or whatever. And then some of that is a touch up with CG if necessary. It just depends on what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be looking forward to how it's going to come into fruition.
I'm very, very curious.
Before or after the next Mass Effect game?
That's a good question.
Yeah, because it's shorter to make a TV show nowadays. But at the same time, they've kind of put a lot of effort into making Mass Effect now that Dragon Age is done. So it could be, ramping up, and by the time, maybe they come out the same exact time. Maybe that's their goal.
I think they're going to be pretty close.
Yeah.
If I were to guess. I think this next Mass Effect game is probably going to take 3 years to get around to, 3 to 4 years to get around to, because they've been toying around with it. They're already in production for it, or at least like pre-production for it. Coming off of Dragon Age, I don't think it's the same teams working on those two things, but I think collectively, I am hearing in the streets that BioWare is feeling very, very confident in itself after Dragon Age, the Veil Guard, which I hope that's true. I hope they are feeling confident so that we can get a banger Mass Effect game. Yeah, it just kind of depends on how long it's going to take. How long did it take from when they announced they were doing a Last of Us show to when we actually got the Last of Us show?
I want to say it was 4 years.
I want to say it was at least 2.
I feel like we heard about it a long, while ago.
Maybe.
Before it was even, going a little bit.
So, yeah, it would not surprise me if these things sort of start coming out at the same time. Or at least I could see 6 months in between each other or something like that. Which, from a cross-medium marketing perspective, that's great because people are going to play the games or people are going to watch the show and be like, oh man, this is cool. Oh, there's a video game. Let me check that out. Oh, there's a new one. Just came out. It's different, so I'm not going to spoil myself on the show, so I can play that. Or Legendary Edition's there. Play the Legendary Edition.
Just to clarify, it got announced in 2020. Came out in 2023. So
The Last of Us?
Yeah. 3 years.
Okay.
Which,
yeah.
If you're with your prediction of when the next Mass Effect game's coming out, 3 to 4 years, if they make that in 3 years, that'd be a good setup for the game. Because I feel like this would be a better thing to release before, since maybe it's a bit safer, especially with how BioWare's been recently. They got good with Dragon Age Veilguard, but that could be a fluke. They could still mess up. They're not out of the water. They're not out of hot water yet. They just cemented themselves better than they otherwise would have if Veilguard was a fail.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And they've already, we covered it last week. They're not doing DLC for Dragon Age, which is a first in BioWare history, at least like for a long, long time. Like,
even Anthem got DLC.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've seen them say, never mind. Well, I guess Andromeda didn't really get anything, but they were planning on doing things for Andromeda and they got canceled. So like it gets complicated in those ways. And then I also forget if they did anything multiplayer wise with Andromeda or even Inquisition. Did Inquisition get a deal?
No, it did not.
Yeah. Regardless, they're giving a hard. Yeah, we're moving on. We're putting pedal to the metal. We're getting back to Mass Effect.